Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all well watered and fed. We've got lots to get our teeth into this afternoon. Just to run you through a few bits. The Bank of Uganda Deputy Governor is coming in. We have the Philippine Finance Secretary, US Secretary of Education, and the US Treasury Deputy Secretary, Wally Adeyemo. So lots on this afternoon, but what better way to kickstart than with a deep dive into emotional intelligence and AI-fueled leadership. This is a session in partnership with DM Radio. DM Radio Chief Executive Officer Eric Kavanagh is going to moderate this one and introduce his panel. Come on up, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand by. For DM Radio, broadcasting live from Reuters, next, Midtown Manhattan. Are you kidding me? What an incredible opportunity. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh here, your humble, if excitable host, with three proven leaders, some of the nicest people I've met. We have Steve Lucas, CEO of Boomi, Radha Subramaniam, CBS CAO and CRO, and Steve McMillan, CEO of Teradata. But first, a confession. I have ties to the Kremlin. Nichivu strashnava, tavarish, orosho. I said it's nothing scary, comrade, it's all good. Because they are severed ties. And in fact, they are severed ties, severed. Because my ties were through Alexander Kananikin, whiskey the post-Soviet Russia. And in Russia, there are so many drunks, he would say. This is 20-odd years ago, working in the Empire State Building. Alex made a lot of money in his 20s in Moscow. He was studying to be a rocket scientist. That's a true story. And he found the earliest days of the interwebs. He launched a little construction company and made tons of money on commodities. So he could see that lumber is 5 rubles a unit over here, 50 over there, buy, sell. Did that for a couple of years, made a lot of money, got into politics. He supported an outsider who got into the Duma and then went up and up and up. And you would recognize this name as Boris Yeltsin, right? So I worked for Boris Yeltsin's financier here at the Empire State Building for a short period of time. And I learned a thing or two about Russian business ethics, let's just say. But why do I tell this story here, now? Well, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about success, right? So we should first understand what failure is. And I learned a thing or two about that. And let's face it, there's a war on, isn't there? And the kinetic phase of this war started when the Kremlin decided to invade Ukraine, their neighbor. And I would ask us to agree on a definition of failure that kinetic warfare, when one nation is blowing the daylights out of another, has been, and always will be a clear and undeniable lagging indicator of failed leadership. And there's a tendency to blame one leader or another. I don't think that's true. I think that's a bit deceptive because there are multiple failures that lead to a situation like this. So let's pray for peace and now make a hard pivot to success. One of the most effervescent and ebullient leaders I've met, Steve Boomi. You have 200 million integration patterns in a lakehouse that you're using to connect all sorts of different systems and data. How do you define success?
Well, thank you, and I speak no Russian, yeah, there you go. First of all, so how do I define success? I think it is, I saw a TikTok one time, and anybody have TikTok? If you haven't, try it, it's awesome. And a gentleman was being interviewed, and they asked him how he defined success, and he said, if your grown kids want to choose to be around you as adults. Now, in a corporate context, do your employees choose to be around you and each other? I think that's how I define success.
Wow, that's cool, because they want to be there. You want to encourage them. You want healthy conversations.
That's right.
You don't want people hiding in the hallway when you come walking down, right?
That's right. Success is healthy conversation. It's people choosing to be around you. It's finding reasons to not just complete work and decouple from each other. Little tough in the world of COVID that post-COVID especially. There was a whole thing, I don't know if many people remember it, it was called an office, and you would come into this place and then you'd go hang out afterwards. And the world has moved away from some of that, and we get why. And I mean, my board asks me every 90 days, hey, so when is everybody going back to work? And you kind of like do your little dance around that thing. But for me, just to put it simply, is success is building a culture where people want to be around each other.
I love that. Steve McMillan, you are leading Teradata. You have led the charge to cloudify, to make it cloud native. I think like $250 million investment. How do you define success?
Well, I think it's important to think about success in the context of, are we making things better every single day? And I think from an AI perspective, we're all thinking, is this going to make the world a better place or a worse place? And you can think about AI and success in AI in terms of, can you trust the output? Is the output ethical? Are these AI engines sustainable in terms of execution? And it's interesting to think about it, success for an organization, and how we talk to organizations about success is thinking about it in 3 horizons. So the first horizon is, how are we using this technology to improve how our business works? And then the second horizon is, how are we embedding this technology into the products, the services, the offers that we have that we're putting out into the industry? And then I think the third way is, how are we transforming our industry? And success looks at each of these 3 horizons and how we're operating. So I think it's a super exciting time to think about success and think about how to use these technologies in a way to improve the world.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And Radha, last but certainly not least.
Yeah, hi guys.
In the creative world.
You're creative world. So what's interesting though is that the creative world isn't that different from the other parts of the data ecosystem or the business world. And I will echo both the Steves. I was going to say Steve and Steve, but on
Steve squared.
The Steve squareds, right? On your workplace should be a place people want to be, where you're having fun, etc. But let me build on that a little bit as well. I think that, and this is easy for me to say because I'm in television, and you should be passionate about what you do. You should have fun at work. You should be moving things forward, like you described. But I think the magic happens when things you believe in deeply, your values, and your business's success go hand in hand. And suddenly you have those magical moments where you're like, wow, I am doing something great and I'm doing something good. And that's quite, it's incredibly rewarding. But let me give you a very specific example of that. CBS has been #1 forever, at least in the US. 19 of the last 20 years. It's only when there's a strike that we fall off plan because it's a strike. But what's on air looks very, very different from what it did 20 years ago. The people look different. The people are diverse. There are more women. There are more people of color. There's LGBTQIA representation, right? And this whole diversity begets, diversity is good for business has almost become a cliche, but we have been able to quantify that and quantify how it's only through diversity and diverse actions that we can be successful, because we live in a country that is incredibly diverse. And as a big tent network, if you think, even if you put in really brutal business speak and think of different segments that you need to aggregate for business success and so on, then you end up with a screen that looks really encouraging. And so when you put a woman president on screen before there's an actual woman president, when you have a gay marriage before gay marriage is legal in many states, and those things lead to incredible business success, that's magic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And diversity is our strength here in the United States. We are an immigrant nation. We have all these different cultures. Colin Quinn has a really funny bit on this, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you should watch him. He does a whole special on all the different people that came into New York and what makes New York. It's worthy of a look. But Steve, on this emotional intelligence side, machines don't have emotional intelligence. They can reflect words back at us, large language models, but obviously don't feel things. You have to feel things. You have to feel and have empathy for your team in order to show emotional intelligence. And let's face it, people are concerned right now that their jobs might go away because of AI, because of LLMs. How do you leverage your emotional intelligence to keep your teams focused, confident, and moving forward?
Great question. I think, first of all, that comes with being direct, transparent, and truthful first and foremost. People know when you're lying. They just know. And if you're, like, let's be honest, AI is going to take people's jobs. If someone's out there that says, well, no, AI is going to augment people, no, that is absolutely not true. AI will take people's jobs. It's kind of like robots in manufacturing.
Yeah.
It took people's jobs. But jobs evolve. That happens. So you have to be direct with your team. You have to be transparent with your team at all times. I can't tell you, this is my 3rd CEO role. And every time I come into a company, I was the CEO of Marketo, which was a take private, and then we sold that to Adobe. I was the CEO of iSIMS, which was a growth story, and we sold that to TA Associates. And Boomi is a different situation. But every time I've come in, number one, sit down with employees. What's going on? What do you want? What do you need? I just want you to tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. And stop trying to spin it. Stop trying to value judge it for me. Let me understand it. And it's difficult to do. Sometimes we debate, like, what is the truth? How do we think about this? But at all times, number one. And then when you do that, I think at the end of the day, people may not like what you're saying, but they know you're not lying. And I think that's the world we live in. People just want more objective truth. And that's such a difficult thing to go get in this world. So that feels like number one. But then number two is you have to get leaders that can live that. When I got, and I'll just kind of pass it over the rest of the team here. When I arrived at this company, this is a high growth, high energy software company. But in the world that we live in, people want to know that you, the executive, the person in charge, you're there for reasons other than money. There are 2 kinds of people in this world, I've decided. There are patriots and mercenaries.
Ooh.
And they're very different. They operate differently. They have different cause and reason. They're both very useful. But there are times where you have to self-modulate carefully with your team. Am I in mercenary mode or am I in patriot mode right now? And you can operate between those 2 things from time to time, but you also have to understand your team. Is this person a patriot? Are they here for the cause, or are they here to maximize their income? And I found, by the way, most salespeople, case in point, where are they?
Mercenaries.
Absolutely. Don't need a test for that one. Most developers, most engineers.
Patriots.
Patriots. Yeah. Now, there are people in the middle. But I think it's understanding that and not value judging that one is good or bad, but that you interact in different ways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Steve, I'll bring you, the other Steve McMillan, bring you back into it. It's all about the people. I got a good buddy who went into the music industry and loved it, and they thought, oh, it's all about the music, it's all about the music. No, it's all about the people. And it's always all about the people. In any industry, in any business, it's the people. Now you have to get to know the people, and as Steve number 1 says, you do that by being candid. What do you think, Steve number 2?
Yeah, I think it's really super interesting. The whole concept of artificial intelligence can generate a lot of fear around the world and inside your organization. But also to note, fear and excitement is processed in the brain by the same system, the limbic system. And so I think the real key is how do you turn that fear into the excitement for the future?
That's good.
Yeah. And I've been in the technology business for longer than I would care to say, but if you think about how we started the 2000s in the decade of the cloud, and then the 2010s were the decade of data, and Steve and I are both in the data and the technology business around that. And then we're in the 2020s, where we've got a decade where analytics and AI is starting to accelerate. Now, none of those 3 decades have actually come to full fruition in terms of the promises of the technologies that have been offered. So I think there's tremendous excitement, as long as, and for these AI solutions that we're developing, as long as you can trust them, as long as they're operating on an ethical basis, as long as they're operating on a sustainable basis, I think it gives that reassurance in terms of the outputs that are being generated to ensure that we move forward in a positive way. I would liken the AI revolution to the Industrial Revolution and the disruption that potentially causes in terms of the different types of jobs that we have and that we execute. But ultimately, I think it elevates human potential and human fulfillment. And I'm incredibly hopeful if we use these systems in the right way, that it does exactly the same thing. And at Teradata, we think that people are empowered by better information. And so that is something that we live every single day when we work with our customers to put in these kind of solutions.
The one thing I'll just comment on, because we were chatting about this right before we came out, this world that we're entering is going to look so remarkably different 5 years from now, given AI, generative large language models. What all of us should be watching out for is one simple thing, and you kind of touched on it, it's explainability. As we rely more on these black box models to come up with a decision or generate something that looks like Julia Roberts or whatever it may be, explainability is going to be paramount in our businesses.
Yeah, and that's going to come from embeddings. So if anyone knows anything about large language models, your embeddings are basically, in a human sense, your memories. So if you think about it, you go to school, you learn things, you study things, but you also have big events that happen to you. Maybe it was a great thing, maybe it was a bad thing. Those memories in the computer LLM world are basically embeddings. So how you train your model, what you feed it, and that's why you want to feed it highly curated, trusted data. Don't just turn it loose on the interwebs. Someone had a great quote yesterday that Reddit is like the road rage version of online social media platforms. You don't want that stuff. No, no, no. You want trusted, curated information. Back to you, Radha. Speaking of that, trusted, curated, creative people. We're like magicians, right? Creative people create things out of nowhere. How do you keep those folks motivated? How do you leverage emotional intelligence to keep your creative teams on track and doing cool things?
Actually, it's kind of funny because people think creation happens out of nowhere, but creation's actually based on a lot of embeddings and a lot of process and a lot of rigor, and in many cases, a lot of data. But let me answer your question more directly, right? From a management perspective, it's exactly what the Steve said. It's radical transparency, radical candor, truthfulness, no pretense that you know all the answers, because you don't. This is a whole new world, and we're learning alongside our teams, and we just have to figure this out together. And the thing that I hire for, more than anything else I've come to learn, is resilience, right? You can teach skills. And the fancy schools and all of that don't do that anymore, right? So I'm really looking for resilience in teams, because in a time of radical change where things can change overnight, those are the people you want in the trenches with you. People who are like, okay, that came out of left field. How do we figure this out? How do we do something different or build on what we did? And so resilience is very, very key, I think, in hiring. But I want to go back to this question of creativity, because the way I think about it, and I actually believe it, and I'm not just saying it, but there's a lot we don't know about what's going to happen with AI, LLMs, and so on. What I do know is some things are going to become highly commoditized. And it could be some code writing. It could be some data analysis. They're just things you can tell the machine to do pretty easily. What we're going to need more of are artists and creatives who can ask interesting questions, right? Anyone can say, can you tell me the 3 things that happened yesterday in blah, blah, blah. That's not a very interesting question. But to generate growth and to generate your next billion-dollar idea, you're going to need really creative thinkers. So all of your analytical minds are going to have to tap into and become more creative. And so I actually think the world, we're going to start to appreciate creatives in the way we haven't before.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, as I think about this, Steve, your CTO made a great comment on DM Radio a few weeks ago. I asked him, what do you think is the most significant aspect of these large language models and machine learning that we should learn to appreciate? And he said, learning. And he meant human learning. And you've talked about this before. We've all talked about it. You have to play around with these technologies. You have to kick the tires. You have to entice them and ask them interesting questions and see where they go. And it's like learning to ride a sailboat or something. It's learning to ride a unicycle. It's a very interesting thing. But the key is to keep your mind open, keep yourself fresh, and absorb the information. What do you think, Steve?
Look, and I've said this to folks in my company, and we're actually getting ready to launch a mandate for my business, which is everyone will use generative. Everyone. This is kind of like, I know some people go, wow, you know, using ChatGPT is kind of cheating. Well, then cheat. Go ahead. The reality is, like, name me a tool anywhere in the world, basically for free, that improves the productivity of your entire workforce by 5 to 10%. Slightly more creative or better research. Name that thing. It's called generative. It's here. It is, in 30 years of software, it's the first time I've seen anything where you can just turn it on. Now you need to practice, you need to get better. I use ChatGPT all the time when I'm looking for what's that extra bit of thinking that I wasn't thinking about, that one extra question, and I'm finding incredible use with it. Now, what I will say is this. Let's fast forward to 5 years from now. Today, this stuff seems like pure frickin' magic, right? You've got ChatGPT and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Let me type in a bunch of stuff and make it talk like Yoda. Right? We were like, that's it. So I literally had it write a story and a song about my 2 cats in Star Wars language. Truly amazing. It's amazing. But the reality is that those things will become a commodity. 5 years from now, there will be thousands and thousands and thousands of large language models over here on the right hand. And on the left hand, there will be companies that are getting incredibly good at prompt engineering and the like. What's in the middle? What's in the middle is your data. How are you using it? Where are you capturing it? How are you creating a set of data that is truly unique to your company and creates competitive advantage? That is the difference. And I'm not talking about all data, because data is sand. It's everywhere. It's infinite. Not much of it is useful. So what are the bits and pieces that you're going to use? So sorry, I've ranted long enough on that, but I will just say, we have to think about the world that will be 5 years from now. And you're so right, because the strength of prompt engineering, the people that have the titles like data analysts today, they need to become your top tier prompt generators, prompt engineers going forward.
Yeah, and there's a great question from the audience here. I'll throw it over to Steve McMillan of Teradata. There are opportunities for new jobs. There are opportunities to do things in new ways. That's what we're going to be doing in the next several years. How do you talk to your team about new ways to do old jobs?
Yeah, I think the whole concept that we're talking about here, leadership in the world of that's influenced by artificial intelligence. You know, if you think about what's the most positive leadership style that you can operate within an organization, and it's the coaching leadership style. Mm-hmm. And the key to being a great coach is being able to ask those great questions. And the same is true for a world that's powered by artificial intelligence. I think you have to encourage your people to think about what are the great questions that you want to ask. You know, we curate within Teradata some of the world's most valuable and large data sets from an enterprise perspective. And some of the things that we do with that data are just amazing. The transformational capability that we've got in terms of using AI to do things like early prediction of diabetes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So something that transforms the world, something that transforms healthcare. If you think about that leadership, asking questions around, you know, what is a disruptive technology and what is an industry that really needs disruption? And I think healthcare is a great example of that. A real industry that needs disruption. And I think artificial intelligence, with the right kind of questioning, the right kind of data, can really improve the quality of people's lives. We spoke about on your show the organization that's actually developing that technology thinks about it in terms of developing solutions which give more years of smiles in their family, right, as you extend people's lives.
I love that.
And I think that's what we should be aiming for from the implementation of these technologies.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great segue, too. I believe the ultimate metric in business and life is happiness. Mm-hmm. If you're happy, everything's fine. If you're unhappy, something is wrong, and you have to find out what that wrong thing is. And Rod, I'll throw this one over to you. And I think we started late. I think we should have a few more minutes, but I remember the first time I had a really good manager. I was 37 years old. I moved to Seattle with my now wife, and I go into his office, and we're talking about things. And we get to the end of my first meeting in a whole new place. I went from New Orleans to Seattle. And we get to the end of the meeting, he goes, "Now, what can I do for you?" And I was like this. I was like, did some VP walk in the room? Like, you talking to me? I had never heard something like that before. What a great manager. Tell us about how you effect that kind of empathy and care and emotional intelligence, real quick.
So it's such a great question, and I'm going to probably overshare a little bit. but we're meant to be radical and transparent and candid, right? And I almost joke when I interview senior leaders that I'm like a tiger mom. Like, I'm going to be your best, biggest advocate, but I'm also going to push you and tell you to do better and tell you can be better and to think outside the box. And that's just one management style. The four of us sitting here, right, have completely different styles. And the key is to not value judge, as Steve once said, right? There are many, many different kinds of leadership. All of them should coach. All of them should have empathy, but we also can't be in a cookie cutter box of leadership. So we have to allow our leaders to flourish their own way. And in turn, we have to see each of the leaders who work for us as individuals with very different styles. So that kind of diversity of management style and approach is also key and key to resilience.
That's fantastic. And folks, we never did get to my story about my role in the lead up to the Ukraine war, so maybe next time. But until then, let's all pray for peace, be there for each other. We're all here together. It's always about the people. And as they say in Austin, Texas, hook 'em horns. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is that how you do it?
Hook 'em horns.
All right. Thank you.